James Dalton, a young, wealthy hotel mogul, grows disillusioned with his lavish, isolated life. In a moment of introspection, he decides to experience life from a different perspective, by working as an average employee in one of his own hotels, without anyone knowing his true identity. What starts as an innocent adventure to rediscover life's simple pleasures takes an unexpected turn when he meets and falls in love with the hotel manager, Emma, a woman with a past full of secrets and a family that will shake James to his core. A millionaire pretending to be poor decides to work at his own hotel and ends up falling in love with the manager. But when he meets her family, he was shocked by what he discovers. James Dalton was the kind of man people admired from a distance but rarely got to know. At 33, he had inherited a vast hotel empire from his parents, who had built the business from the ground up. Known for his sharp business acumen and ruthless decisions, James turned his hotels into a global chain. His life was one of constant luxury, fine wines, exotic vacations, private jets, but also loneliness. Everywhere he went, people saw his wealth and status before they saw him. The constant barrage of sycophants and opportunists wore him down. The thought had been nagging at him for months: what if he could live a simpler life, free from the suffocating expectations that came with being a millionaire? What if people could meet him for who he was, without the filter of wealth? One cold evening in his penthouse, after another pointless social event filled with hollow conversations, James made a spontaneous decision. He would go undercover as a regular worker at one of his hotels, the Golden Palm Resort, his flagship property. He wouldn't be the owner or the CEO. He would simply be James Roberts, an average man looking for a job. The next morning, James had his team arrange the necessary paperwork under his new identity, ensuring that no one at the hotel would recognize him. His story was simple: he was a drifter with an employment gap, looking to rebuild his life. With everything set, he packed a modest suitcase and left behind his world of wealth to step into the unknown. James arrived at the Golden Palm Resort as a new man. The hotel lobby was as breathtaking as ever: gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the soft hum of guests enjoying their stay. For the first time, he wasn't walking through as the owner but as an employee, nervous about his first day on the job. He couldn't help but feel a sense of thrill at the thought. Emma Taylor, the hotel's manager, was nothing like he had expected. In her mid-30s, she was sharp, efficient, and graceful under pressure. She had a no-nonsense attitude but balanced it with a warmth that made both guests and staff feel at ease. Emma had worked her way up the ranks, and her dedication was evident in every detail of the hotel's operation. Little did she know that the new maintenance worker was her actual boss. James was assigned to various odd jobs around the hotel, cleaning rooms, fixing broken lights, and even working as a bellboy. At first, it was overwhelming. He was used to giving orders, not taking them. But as the days passed, he began to settle into the rhythm of the work. The physical labor was surprisingly fulfilling. For the first time in years, he wasn't surrounded by people telling him what he wanted to hear. The staff treated him like one of their own, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged. Emma, despite her strict professionalism, found herself intrigued by James. He was different from the other staff. He worked hard, didn't complain, and seemed genuinely interested in the job, even though he appeared overqualified for such menial tasks. There was a quiet humility about him that drew her in, and soon, their casual work conversations turned into something deeper. James found himself falling for Emma. She was kind, intelligent, and had a passion for the hotel that mirrored his own. But he was torn. How could he tell her who he really was? Would she feel betrayed if she discovered the truth? He wanted to keep the illusion alive for just a little longer, to enjoy being James Roberts, the man she was growing to care for, and not James Dalton, the billionaire whose name was on the hotel's deed. As their relationship deepened, James learned more about Emma's life. She had a complicated family situation. Her father had passed away when she was young, leaving her mother to raise her and her two younger siblings. Emma had been the rock of her family, working tirelessly to provide for them and put her siblings through school. She rarely spoke about her past, but when she did, James could hear the weight of responsibility in her voice. One evening, after a particularly long day, James and Emma were sharing a quiet moment in the hotel's garden. Emma, feeling vulnerable, opened up about her family's struggles. She spoke about the financial burdens, the sacrifices she had made, and the deep love she had for her family. It was in that moment that James realized how much he admired her strength. He wanted to be a part of her world, but his secret loomed over him like a dark cloud. Just as he was about to confess his true identity, Emma's phone rang. It was her mother. Emma's face turned pale as she listened to the voice on the other end. There was a family emergency, and she had to leave immediately. James offered to go with her, but Emma insisted she needed to handle it alone. She left the hotel in a rush, leaving James with a sinking feeling that his chance to come clean had slipped away. The next day, James couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He decided to follow Emma, desperate to make sure she was okay and to finally tell her the truth. What he discovered, however, was far beyond anything he had imagined. When he arrived at Emma's family home, he was shocked to find it in a state of disrepair. The house was modest, a stark contrast to the luxury of the hotel where Emma worked. But it wasn't the house that shocked him, it was the man sitting at the kitchen table. James froze. Sitting there, drinking coffee, was his estranged uncle, Charles Dalton. Charles had been cut off from the family years ago due to a bitter business feud with James' father. The rift had torn the family apart, and Charles had vanished from James' life. But now, here he was, living in the same house as Emma's family. James quickly put the pieces together. Charles was Emma's stepfather. He had married her mother after Emma's father had passed away, but had never mentioned his connection to the Dalton family. The realization hit James like a freight train. If Emma found out who he really was, it wouldn't just be a simple lie. It would be the reopening of old wounds, a betrayal that could destroy everything. James was trapped. He loved Emma, but the truth was too dangerous to reveal. His uncle had been living a quiet life, far from the family drama that had consumed the Dalton name. If James exposed himself, it would drag Emma and her family into the spotlight and reopen the wounds of the past. For days, James wrestled with his conscience. He couldn't bear the thought of losing Emma, but he also couldn't continue living a lie. Meanwhile, Emma sensed something was off. James had become distant, his once easygoing demeanor replaced by a tension she couldn't explain. The breaking point came one evening when Emma, frustrated by James' strange behavior, confronted him. She demanded to know what he was hiding. Torn between his love for her and his fear of the consequences, James finally confessed the truth. Emma was devastated. Not only had James lied about his identity, but the revelation of his connection to her stepfather was a betrayal she couldn't comprehend. She felt used, manipulated, and heartbroken. In that moment, everything between them shattered. She left the hotel, unable to face James or the truth of their tangled lives. For weeks, James was consumed by guilt and regret. He had wanted to escape the burden of his wealth, but instead, he had brought pain to the woman he loved. James couldn't stand by and let Emma slip away. Determined to make things right, he tracked her down, finding her at her family's home once more. This time, he came not as James Roberts or even James Dalton, but as a man willing to face the consequences of his actions. He sat down with Emma and her family, including Charles, and laid everything on the table. He told them about his decision to go undercover, his growing feelings for Emma, and the reasons he hadn't revealed the truth sooner. It was a raw, vulnerable moment, and for the first time, James was truly honest with himself and the people he cared about. Emma listened, her heart torn between anger and the love she still felt for him. Charles, too, was conflicted. He had left the Dalton family to start fresh, and James' presence threatened to unravel the life he had built. But as the conversation continued, it became clear that the only way forward was through forgiveness. Charles, seeing the sincerity in James' apology, extended an olive branch. He hadn't wanted the family feud to affect Emma's happiness, and he didn't want to be the reason she lost the man she loved. Emma, though hurt, couldn't deny the depth of her feelings for James. It would take time to rebuild the trust they had lost, but she wasn't ready to give up on them just yet. In the weeks that followed, James worked hard to repair the damage he had caused. He didn't try to buy Emma's forgiveness or use his wealth to fix things. Instead, he showed her, day by day, that he was the man she had fallen in love with, honest, hard-working, and willing to put in the effort to make their relationship work. Emma, slowly but surely, began to let her guard down. The wounds were still there, but they were healing. She realized that while James' wealth had complicated things, it hadn't changed who he was at his core. As for Charles, he and James reached a truce. The family feud that had torn them apart was finally put to rest, and while their relationship would never be perfect, they found common ground in their love for Emma and her family. In the end, James learned that wealth and power weren't the keys to happiness. It was love, connection, and honesty that mattered most. And in Emma, he had found all three. As they stood together, watching the sunset from the hotel's garden, James knew that his life would never be the same. He had come to the Golden Palm looking for a fresh start, and in Emma, he had found his home. The end.